G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Yes, we're just in the start, but if you're an Australian and you've got the long weekend, I bet you're looking forward to that. Now today we do have a fair bit to go over. We're going to look at new armies being raised. Of course, we're going to have a look at the maps. We're going to talk about some new strikes and some very interesting bits and pieces with this, with new weapon systems coming into play. We need to talk about the funding to Ukraine from the US and how that is going to impact shells, and where there is some relief coming for that artillery shortage that we do see in Ukraine, but we need to then talk about an air defense shortage as well. We're going to talk about strikes on power plants, both within Ukraine, within Russia, the legalities of this, how it's all going. We're going to look at some footage. We're going to look down in Crimea at the ships that apparently were damaged and maybe another one damaged. And of course, then we're going to look over what Putin, Zelensky and Macron have said then about the savage, brutal, murderous attack that happened in Moscow. Now, where I want to start is overnight we had, or I shouldn't actually say overnight, yesterday, Russia launched 2 surprise missile attacks in broad daylight at Kiev and Odessa. Now, I said overnight because I'm very used to these strikes, both by a drone or by a missile, being at night. It tends to be when they have the most success with those missiles moving in the air. And people won't like me saying this, but striking certain targets at night does reduce the risk of collateral damage as well, and the increase in, of course, your drones moving through the sky. Now, initially, these missiles reported were unknown ballistic missiles, but since then it has been confirmed that these were Zyklon hypersonic missiles. Now, we have spoken previously about these, and these are a new weapon. We had some evidence come up. We looked at some evidence of maybe these are being used, maybe this is what it is, although these share a lot of parts with other missile systems over the past, say, 6 to 8 weeks, and we're getting more and more evidence that a new hypersonic missile has entered service. Now, these were launched from Crimea, at least being reported, and there were no missile launches in the Black Sea Fleet as far as ships at the time, so it is seeming like these were from ground-based launches. Now, Ukraine reports that these missiles aimed at Kyiv were successfully intercepted, and the damage that you see is from debris from then the intercepted missiles, although the SBU has confirmed that these were targeting areas where their high-ranking officials were located. So we should also note that yesterday in Ukraine was their SBU day, like a day of celebration for the SBU. So we'll look at some of the limited photographs we do have of the damage here, of this building then being collapsed here in daylight. Now, something else we need to talk about with this specific missile system is there was no air raid siren. That this is from Kiev Post. Multiple explosions rang out in central Kyiv on Monday, approximately 30 seconds following the air raid sirens kicked off in the Ukrainian capital. Officials urged residents to take shelter, but that the air raid siren, the detection system for these, didn't pick up the missiles, and there was zero warning. The system then went off after that. Now, let's look at then what the Kiev Post has said about this targeting then the SBU. We have another photograph here of the damage to this building. Now, Kiev Post sources within the SBU have confirmed 2 ballistic missiles were launched from Russian-occupied Crimea to Kyiv, aimed at SBU officers. That observing the day, but both missiles, according to the Air Force, were shot down and didn't reach the target. Now, officially, Ukraine says that these missiles had been intercepted, and the debris hit the building we're looking at is a children's gymnastics studio, that no one was in the studio at the time, although there are injuries from this. But there is a lot of voices suggesting that the missiles did find their targets and that it did hit an area of which there were senior members within the intelligence service there meeting. Look, with all these strikes, we will never know. One thing I will say about intelligence services like this, as far as if you're talking SBU or FSB or CIA or ISIS or whoever you want, that if you're having a meeting somewhere with a lot of members, it's not just going to be, let's do it at the most obvious place in their headquarters. that the most secret safe houses bases are ones that just blend in. That is what these services actually do. But we have a little bit more too. So we've got a photograph here of a part of the zircon that is said to be struck. Look, I don't know what we're looking at, whether this is a boost stage, whether whatever. Unlike other people on the internet, I'm not a missile expert, or at least I won't claim to be, but we don't have much of what is hit in Odessa today. But what we do have is some very interesting audio that suggests something has been hit. So for the strikes that went in there, it does sound like this is ammunition cooking off. But that is literally all we have of that strike so far. Again, we don't know, but what we do know is Russia is launching more strikes into Ukraine, up to 190 missiles over the past few weeks, and we do think that that will continue into the future, with some pages saying that over the next 24 to 48 hours, once the Tu-95s and other bombers get refitted, refueled, bombs back on, that we are going to see more waves of attack. And why is this? Well, it's Russia capitalizing on shortages within Ukraine. We had this from the weeks gone past. More and more warnings about the lack of air defense, especially up to the end of March, which is where we are now. That policymakers told European and US officials that munitions for some of the air defense systems may be nearly used up by the end of March. Well, Ukraine tried to shoot down 4 in every 5 missiles fired at cities. It may soon be able to target 1 in 5. That would have a significant effect on life in Ukraine's urban centres, which it is. We're seeing, I'll show you in a photograph later, I've got it probably in the wrong folder, but that 200,000 people have no power in Kharkiv, and there's a lot of other areas out of power as well. And we do know that over the last year that there has been relative normalcy within those centres. So this is a big shift. But of course, Russia is capitalising on that lack of air defence to get it in. And like we looked at in yesterday from Ukraine's official claims from that huge strikes the other night, that 0 of the Kinzhal hypersonics were shot down. And we know that not every air defence system can hit those. There's questions of what can actually hit them in general. But at the end of the day, we are seeing an increase in successful strikes in certain areas. Somewhere like Kyiv will always be very difficult because just the amount of air defense being the capital. But we may see more successful strikes in areas like Odessa, which is what we've been seeing a lot of the focus recently, or having to move air defense away from the front line to protect those areas and protect then those power plants or critical infrastructure. So then Russia will have more success with things like their cheaper Fab glide bombs on the front line. That is where I see all of that sort of going. So let's actually have a look at more of these power strikes as well that has been happening, both Ukraine into Russia, Russia into Ukraine. We've had a lot come out of people saying America and countries aren't very happy about hitting some of these facilities in Russia for escalation. What I'll say about the legality of striking anything like this, these are seen as dual use targets. Yes, critical infrastructure for civilians. Yes, that is. But power especially is critical infrastructure for military as well. Look at Iraq, look at Gaza, look at whatever. One of the first things you strike is infrastructure like this. It affects not only frontline elements and, you know, the cities, it then affects your economy as well. Power plants, whether they're Ukrainian, whether they're Russian, whether they're fucking willies. In a war with belligerents, they are a legit target and crimes are not being committed, whether it's Ukraine into Russia or striking back. Now, you can claim, well, the whole war is illegal from Russia. Yep, a lawyer I spoke to has said that, yes, but specific target of a facility like that, that is in a war which you've got belligerents participating in, you can strike dual-use infrastructure. It's just what it is. Now, this is the photograph that I was talking about of Kharkiv. There's a few lights on. We know that people from the strikes at the end of 22 in winter, where Ukraine really had problems with energy, that a lot of people bought your big battery packs or generators, but the majority here are out of power. We also have overnight that in the Rostov region down here, that a Russian power plant has been hit as well. So there was a wave of Ukrainian drones attacked these power plants. Now, this is the Novocherkassk plant. The extent of the damage yet is actually unknown, but initial varying reports say that 2 full units here have stopped working. That said, I can't tell you exactly what the damage is here. The information is very, very limited. Now, down in Zap Oblast here, we have a dam, which you would have actually seen if you've watched my videos from pre-war. Just on like the inside of this dam, there's a real touristy zone. I can't actually remember what it was, but it was something hundreds of years old. I'll put it up here if I can remember what it actually was. But I was at a touristy spot here, and it's on the inside of this. So I've driven across this multiple times, both in and out of the war, and we can see the damage that the strikes the other day had on this. I showed you in yesterday's video of the KH missile coming in, firing off the flares. We do not need the audio, and having significant damage to then the dam here, although the dam is said to be holding. There's no threat of that then collapsing. But this is from DTEK, who is Ukraine's largest private energy supplier, saying that they've temporarily lost half of its available generation capacity. And teams are working to restore power and appealing to international partners to urgently supply critical equipment such as transformers. The company estimates that it'll be able to restore 50% of lost capacity within weeks, but other repairs will take longer, with other people quoting that they've said it could take months to come back on. And this is some more quotes from the Kiev Independent on state television as well. Now, this is the hydroelectric power station in Zap. That was the video we just showed you crossing there, but there was no risk for a breach of the dam. That would be catastrophic if that happened. I remember every time I've driven across this, we're talking down in here, like if this went, this would be insane. Now, said the Russian attack was particularly damaging as it targeted both generating and distribution parts of the Ukrainian energy system. Several types of generating capacities were hit. A large number of thermal power plants were hit, and a hydrogen generating facility was hit. So a lot of hits and a lot of successful hits on what was being targeted here. The second part is that the enemy hit a lot of Ukenergo network nodes, transformers. This attack simultaneously destroyed the system's ability to transmit electricity and undermines our generation capabilities. So there are big problems with electricity moving into the future as well. Of course, not only affecting economy, affecting everything on the front, and of course in Russia as well. These strikes on oil facilities, power facilities, has a lot of effect on not only the resident civilians there, but the military and export of those as well. But power plants, oil facilities, petroleum, these are legit targets in times of war. Now, something I do want to look at before we have a look at one more power-related bloody thing. We have this video here, and it turns on its side, so it's a pain in the ass. We see then a Su-34 very low here coming across this bridge, filmed from some fishermen, or fishermen, as Sam, is that bloody bloke name, whoever the singer is. But we see then here coming through here, and then we'll see, if you look really sharp, I'll put it in the Telegram so you can pause better. You can see just there and there, 2 big sparks. And you see then here a power line. And this plane then wings level. It didn't crash, goes back, but actually went through the power lines, which I'm very surprised that airframe actually stayed together. Now, Fighter Bomber said this: yesterday, returning from another combat mission, the best plane with crew inside, dodging a flock of those spring birds of yours who still haven't learned to read telegrams, blew the hell out of the wires, depriving individual residents of the glorious city of Vorozhin of electricity. So it took out the power in here and said he asks for forgiveness going through there. I bet he might need a new bloody set of flight DACs after that. Now, these ships, people jumped on me and said, there is visible damage, blah, blah, blah. Let's have a look again. So, look, we have this ship, what is replicated down here, and we do see something out the back of this. Is this oil, or is that the ship is coming into port and it's got like side thrust on, or however this works from the tugs, and it is kicking up silt off the bottom? I don't know. It looks like it's underwater to me. What to me doesn't say oil. We can see, I looked at the visible strikes yesterday on the dry dock and the dock here, but to the tops of the ships, there is no noticeable damage on these. Maybe this is oil, maybe it's not, but we are unsure. Saying that there was severe critical damage to these ships. Is this a smoking gun, this photograph? I don't know. Would it hold up in court? I don't know. But to me and everyone else on the internet, it just doesn't seem like it is. But we do have the GUR has then released this only today. Russia's Yamal large landing ship was destroyed. Details of damage. So the photograph I showed you was Amal and the Azov ship. And then we've got from a Navy spokesman saying that a third ship was damaged. But according to Ukraine's military intelligence, the Yamal warship suffered critical damage. A hole in the upper deck caused it to roll starboard side, so listing one way. Yet there's no more footage has come out, whether satellite on the ground or anything has come out to prove these claims yet. So maybe just hold off on this. But interesting today, this bloke who is Dmitry Pletenchuk, who is the Ukrainian Navy spokesman, has then said this. Well, in fact, the information always takes time to verify it completely. We provide it in the same way. I only confirmed this morning that both ships were damaged. Now, continuing. Now, there is also a question about the damage to the Ivan Hurst. You may have heard me talk about the Ivan Hurst before because it has been attacked with the drone boats before, but did survive those. This information is also verified. As for the nature of the damage, you'll have to wait until the information is collected as you understand. So saying there was a third ship then damaged. Mr. Demetria, I want to clarify, the Ivan Hurst is the third ship that has not been mentioned so far before. Yes, that's right. There's suspicion that he probably also received damage. And as soon as we collect this information from various sources, we'll be able to verify it and we'll be able to operate it as fact. So saying there was 3 ships damaged in here, give it maybe another 24 hours. We'll see. This stuff always comes out pretty quickly. I know when the Ivan Hurst was attacked, I believe about this time last year, that we got the same sort of stuff. And then we saw it coming into port. It had evidence of damage, but things do come through always fairly quickly. It always does. Now, let's have a look at the maps before we look over what Putin, Macron, Zelensky has said, as well as some issues and fixes with shells. Now, there are only a few small changes on this map, and those changes only result in grey zone movement, so no red zone. So we'll come up into Bakhmut in here. Today's the 26th, and we'll step back and forward, and we only see a grey zone increase in Russia's favour if it's increasing west in this region, around from Kromovo, Ivanovsky here. And we do have a lot of reports that the situation in Chasiv Yar is deteriorating as the FABs and artillery are dropping on this area, of course, as this has stepped up over previous days. If we can load this, we do see that then movement through there. Now, we don't have a Syriac map update for then Bakhmut, but we do have down here then into Avdiivka. So we also saw this over the past 3 days has stepped up dramatically in this to the first lines of defense here. So let's pull this across and see where this is having a look. Now, we just need to line up a couple of things on this. So this is Semenivka, here is Badachi, and here is Stepove. So it's showing in this region here is emulated by then this situation west of Avdiivka. Russian army begun advancing north of Badachi and reached the small pond adjacent to then the locality. So we're talking this pond just up north of Badachi here. So not being shown across both maps yet. Again, like I always say, we want it to be shown across both maps, but there's no change in here other than a grey zone movement out from Tolmenki towards Umansk as well. Now, Pervomayeski down here, we haven't seen any change on this map for a while, but we do have Syriac giving an update here too. Looking just above Verdani, Pervomayeski. So we have Verdani, Pervomayeski, so closing up ground just above in here, saying situation northwest Donetsk City, but this, I'd say this is Donetsk City, so this is Avdiivka, so same region. The Russian army made small advances inside Pervomayeski, adjacent to the church, while they continued to advance from the northern plantations after the capture of Tolmenki. So we saw Tolmenki fall, and then it has pushed through in this region. On the other hand, Russian troops failed to consolidate the control over this petrol station and retreated to the dam of this pond. So there was a retreatment in the center here. So we're talking in here that Russia did fail to get an area in here and then had to fall back. And I think these maps are showing fairly similar. Yeah, they're not, the exact same, but again, in here, fairly similar. And we can see in this region just here where that move then has been made over the past few days. Now, where will we move next? We'll just go south before then we go up into the north. So you've got to turn left to go right. Novomayalivka, this is the region of which we did see a large shift between the last couple of days, and there's said to be more shift in here again, now actually lining up probably actually closer to what then this map shows. So I think there's this movement in the north here, look, to my eye, pretty bloody close, where it cuts halfway down this field, pretty bloody close. Let's have a look right in the center, sort of out here, look, pretty bloody close. Situation southwest of Donetsk. In the last 4 days, Russian army continued advancing in the plantations north of Novomayalivka, heading to the town from this axis. Meanwhile, inside the town, troops secured an area adjacent to the Sugi Yali River while they were trying to expel Ukrainian army from the neighboring warehouses. So, is some movement in here, some advancement. These is replicated across both maps. So, at this point in time, I'm happy to say that Novomayalivka is looking exactly like it's saying between these maps, as they're both reflective of each other. Now, just want to have a look down in Robotny area, as I don't think we didn't see any change in there. Sorry to waste your time, but let's go up into sort of the northeast of the country. So, of course, what we're doing is this little nub down here, and this is the Terney front. There's no movement shown on this map. We have seen some over the past, say, several days, but we do see that in these two tree lines here, we do see a retreat and a push out, a retreat on the southern and a push on the northern here, not replicated across this map. And this blue dot, of course, is replicating then Terney. But I think overall, these show pretty bloody close. Situation north of Donetsk, positional battles continue at the eastern outskirts of Terney, with the Russian army making small gains and small retreats in this axis. Now, we need to move up into the northeast. One of, if not the most important axes, I believe, overall, is this Sinkivka-Kupiansk front. Now, these greens where Russia had, and this was the offensive that did sweep across from Ukraine in late 2022, when they really had the upper hand as Russia was on the back foot here. This is an incredibly important area, although for the ground, the topography, Ukraine has the advantage of the hills in the west here of Kupiansk for shelling, for tanks, for a bit of everything. No change shown on then the deep state map, but if we have a look at this, here we go. Situation, wrong one. Would have been funny. So, let's move this across. Now I've done it. Oh, god damn. You can't trust me on this. Now, we're talking just in here, which is talking just in this region here. Situation of northeastern front. During the last 3 days, Ukrainian army retook control over most of the northern part of Sinkivka, forcing the withdrawal of the Russian army towards the forest and northern plantations. Over the past couple of months, all we've seen is Russia trying to get out of these forests and secure Sinkivka, and having very little success at all doing just that, what they're trying to do. But for the maps, that is all. Now, let's talk then about the shells. Now, US and House of Reps, they have then gone on recess for another 2 weeks. The recess kicked off Monday, so yesterday, and the fate of US aid to Ukraine, which is running low on ammunition in its war with Russia, remains still unsettled. Ukraine can't afford this time going forward with this not going through. McCall noted the Face of the Nation that the situation in Ukraine is dire. So there's at least another few weeks on this. And then depending on what the negotiations are, and depending on the vote on the floor, we just don't know. But that situation there has been for months and months now. And we don't know if it's any closer to being resolved than when it bloody started. But there is some relief here that Ukraine has received 500,000 artillery shells from the EU, and the rest of the promised million will be delivered by the end of the year. Remember, that promised million was by the beginning of this year, end of last. So still very short. But according to the EU Foreign Policy Chief, Joseph Borrell, Additionally, the European defence industry is also providing Ukraine 400,000 shells through commercial contracts. The Czech initiative to buy ammunition outside the EU comes in addition to these efforts. However, it is far from being enough. We have to increase both our capacity of production and the financial resources devoted to support Ukraine. So there will be some relief with some of this Czech initiative, some other bits and pieces coming in, but there is no long-term fix in place if the US then pulls funding, or if the US has limited funding. And even then, the shell production just in the West is not high enough to sustain large wars and have backfilled product as well. It is one thing for Estonia, Lithuania to, we're sending every shell and every tank. That's one thing. But for the US, for Australia, for Canada, for the UK, for Germany, for France, they just can't do that. It just doesn't work like that. Now, let's have a look then at the Moscow attack. And I am going to say straight off the bat that Putin's speech here on the Kremlin website, this is where I like to get what he has said, because you never know how things are interpreted. I get it from there. But at the bottom here, I've cropped out, it says to be continued, and they haven't got the full bloody speech online yet. So I've got some other bits from Reuters, but I'll try and update you tomorrow with exactly what was said. But he speaks about then, of course, this attack. Those who planned this terror attack hope to sow panic and discord in our society, but instead met with our unity and resolve to counter this evil. With any attack like this, whether it is 9/11, whether it's October the 7th, whether it is any number of these, unity always comes out as this. And now, this is where a lot of people are saying that this is hallmarks of an inside job, is it does unite, and you'll get a lot of people then lining up at recruitment offices or supporting then the Ministry of Defence and the soldiers as well. That's where people are pointing at, and we have had multiple examples in past histories. Look at the start of other wars where there has been an inside job event like this to then either justify, launch a war. You can probably know what some of the ones I'm talking about that go back even decades. I'd like to report to you in the course of the investigation and search to identify all those who are involved in the terrorist attack and those who ordered and organised it. Now, we know that the crime was perpetrated by radical Islamists. The Islamic world itself has been fighting this ideology for centuries, but we're also seeing how the United States is using different channels to try and convince its satellites and other countries of the world that, according to its intelligence, there is supposedly no sign of Kyiv's involvement in the Moscow terrorist attacks, and that the deadly terrorist attack was perpetrated by followers of Islam, members of IS, an organization banned in Russia. That said, we do know that Russia has launched a lot of attacks specifically with, say, Wagner PMC against ISIS. So just because it's a banned organization doesn't mean that attacks like this can't happen. It's banned here too. We could definitely have attacks. We know whose hands were used to commit this atrocity against Russia and its people. We want to know who ordered it. Now, this is what we'll see a lot of people. We know these guys are IS, Tajik, whatever, but who is further down the line from this? Is it Ukraine? Is it the CIA? Is it IS? Or is it a Russian intelligence service? That's where all the balls are in the air at the moment. Now, this does continue here. Again, I'll get the full thing for you tomorrow. This atrocity may be a link in a whole series of attempts by those who have been at war with our country since 2014 with the hands of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. Of course, it is necessary to answer the question, why, after committing the crime, the terrorists tried to go to Ukraine? Who was waiting for them there? Now, I'll get the full thing tomorrow. Now, Zelensky has come back with a video and this as well. This will suffice. Putin spoke to himself again today, which was broadcast on television again. He accused Ukraine, sick, cynical creature. In his mind, everyone is a terrorist except himself, despite the fact that he has fed terror for 2 decades. Putin is the largest window for terror. He and his special services, when he vanishes, so will the demand for terror and violence, because it is his, no one else's. That said, terror will always continue around the world, regardless of where or how we see this pop up everywhere. But this is what Zelensky is saying in defense to what Putin is saying and claiming. Now, interestingly in this as well, speaking Cayenne, Macron has said this: the intelligence had confirmed that Islamic State entity fomented this attack and then carried it out, saying this particular group, which is believed to be involved in this attack, has carried out several attempts on our soil in recent months. Now, the French Interior Minister said the Islamist threat can affect everyone at any moment. Macron offered for France and Russia to increase cooperation on counter-terrorism, but spoke out against instrumentalization or distortion after Putin's attempt to pin the Moscow attack on Kiev without evidence. That said, look at any investigation. Investigation of any sort will take weeks and weeks and months. Anyone who's come to a firm like this is right here and now, I don't know. It's going to take a hell of a long time for anyone to actually get through how long this takes. But if you have an insurance claim on your house, it takes more than 48 hours to come through of what then actually happened. So we're not 100% sure on this. One thing I would hope is I hope that if other countries had, intel that this was going to take place, that yes, we know that Macron hasn't spoken to Putin for years and other leaders, whatever, but that there'll still be a call up going, we've got intel that there's going to be X attack. Blah. I don't know. But attacks from groups like that can happen anywhere at any time. And God, sometimes there's just no reasoning behind it other than just extremism as well. But also there may be other factors at play behind the scenes with security services as well. It's not the first and it won't be the last time that we see something like this. You also have the MOD update as well, that the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced on the 20th of March that Russia will create 2 new armies in 2024. They reportedly be formed by 14 divisions and 16 brigades. The exact type, location, and composition of these units was not stated, although a mix including mechanized armor, artillery, and logistics is most likely. It is a realistic possibility that these new formations are linked to previous new unit announcements and planned brigade to division uplifts. Given Russia's successful recruitment efforts, it is likely that units can be sufficiently staffed. However, given Russia's limited training, widespread use of legacy equipment and infrastructure issues, it is likely these units will suffer similar resourcing problems. Very interesting that Russia does be able to sufficiently staff these, and they are able to then fire waves and waves of missiles, all of things of manpower and missiles and whatever that we heard that they were running out of at one time. And I will say, after the attack in Moscow, the recruitment for this will be then easier than ever. And the last thing that this war needs is more people pushing into this, and it is the last thing that the frontline defense of Ukraine needs is more and more soldiers pushing on that and more equipment coming in, as right now the frontline is moving in Russia's favor, as well as the targeted attacks into cities. Anyway, legends, that is the end of video today. If you'd like to support me, links down below. Yesterday's video was bloody restricted instantly, what annoyed me, but that's all good. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.